Hello and welcome to this impromptu video where I'll be giving us some sort of review or some feedback with regards to Forza Motorsport 8 or without number, which came out just this week for Game Pass and last week with the Premium Edition, which I didn't buy because you know how games are these days, right? So I want to be very clear. Well, first of all, this video is just going to be me and the camera. So usually people put some sort of background image or some video running. I didn't record my gameplay. I probably should have had done that in retrospect, but I didn't. And so if you want to treat this like a podcast of some sort, so you just like leave it as the background and you'll hear and you do something else, that's fine because the image is going to be this pretty much. So don't expect any sort of transition scene here. Well, that said, I want to record this video with the perspective of someone that plays iRacing and has played iRacing for a long time, been in iRacing since I think 2010, 2011, so about 13 years pretty much. And obviously, when you come into Forza with a background like that, I'm not going to review here and say, well, it's not as good of a simulator as iRacing, because evidently that would never be the case, right? It is not even what they're aiming for, so it would be a very unreasonable review to say something like that. So I'm not going to do that. And my perspective with this review here is, given that you have iRacing, so I'm assuming that you watching this video either have iRacing, have a bunch of, a good amount of content in there, and have that as an option as a PC gamer. Obviously, if you have a PlayStation, you have an Xbox, you don't have iRacing there. Maybe you have ACC, maybe you have something else, and you could substitute that in the comparison somewhat, all right? But yeah, given that you have some sort of simulator in your PC, that can be Automobilista 2, it could be R-Factor 2, it could be Race Room. I don't know which game you like. iRacing is the one I play, but evidently you can substitute that for any game that you prefer, right? That's the other caveat I'll say here. Okay, but given that you have a simulator at your disposal, would Forza be a good choice for you? And in that sense, I think it's pretty much obvious that we will be mostly talking about single player here, because when you talk about multiplayer, it would be very hard for Forza to be a substitute in the PC, considering the wheel and everything, to iRacing or ACC or something like that, right? I will talk about the multiplayer, but it won't be a big focus because it's an unfair comparison. Right, so that's a lot of maybes and caveats and everything, but you know the perspective I'm coming from here. I don't want to be unfair to the game. I think it's a good game, for sure. You could argue it's not as good as Gran Turismo. I didn't play Gran Turismo 7. I think from the videos I've seen, maybe a fair opinion. It's not as good as Forza 4. I never played Forza 4. I don't know. I think the last console racer I played was Gran Turismo 4 on PlayStation 2. I got Gran Turismo 5 Prologue on the PlayStation 3, but at that point I was doing other things in life. And then right after that, I jumped straight into iRacing. And so, yeah, from a console standpoint, the last image in my head I have is Gran Turismo 4 and Burnout 3 and those kinds of games that everybody knows and everybody talks about in the internet, and so great games. But it's a different era, right? Okay, let's start with, I have some topics here on my second monitor, so just go over so I don't forget anything. First of all, graphics. I think the graphics are okay. They're better than iRacing for sure. That's a fair take. But I mean, if you play something like iRacing and you're not that concerned about graphics, right? I really am not. I play a bunch of retro games. If you see other games in the channel here, you should speedrun Mega Man X and Mario and Zelda randomizers, and like graphics don't bother me one bit. One thing I will say about the graphics that disappointed me a bit is the loading. So I have a pretty good system. I have an i7, I think 12th generation, an RTX 3080 Ti, and sufficient amount of RAM and NVMe and all that. And what happened is that at points the game would just like forget to load the textures or the road or something, and you're just driving. If you see some videos, you probably have seen this at this point, I would imagine. You're driving and then the track kind of disappears and you're driving in space, and then after a few seconds the track loads in and you may or may not have crashed. By then, it seems like as the car is moving faster, the likelihood of that happening is a bit bigger, is what I've seen. And I mean, that's not good, right? That shouldn't happen. It's not game breaking or anything. I think it crashed once because of that, but the other times I could remember where the track was and do the turns and it worked out fine. And yeah, so not good. But I would imagine they will fix this soonish. Doesn't seem like the hardest problem to solve. Seems like these days games come out, they're not exactly finished, right? Next is audio. Once again, I think the audio is fine. A bit muffled, I think. I didn't think the engine sounds were that visceral or anything. I'm not one to say that iRacing has the best sound ever or anything, but the latest cars have been really good. I think that the Super Formula had really good sound. I really like the one of the GTPs. I think it was the Cadillac, the yellow one, right? Which also is in the Forza cover, by the way. It has really fantastic sound in iRacing. And in that sense, I didn't think any car in Forza had that great amounts of audio or anything. But, I mean, it's fine. You see me say the words fine a lot in this review, I think. Next is FFB. Now, FFB is a huge problem, in my opinion. Historically, I do understand from what I've read and seen that Forza hasn't had the best FFB up until this point. The agreement seems to be that the FFB this time around is the best it's ever been. And if this is the best it's ever been, then wow, this is a bit shocking, to be honest, because it's really bad. I have good equipment, as you guys may or may not have seen from the other videos in this channel. I have a VRS Driving Force Pro base, which is a 20 Nm direct drive base. I have an Asher V3 USB racing wheel, 80/20 rig, and VRS DFP pedals. So it's a pretty good equipment. And evidently it doesn't have native support inside the game. I would never expect that. It has Fanatec, it has Logitech, it has Trustmaster, the usual brands. It has Mozza even, I think, Mozza Racing. But I went to the VRS forums. There were some settings there that people said, yeah, I got this to work, it looks pretty good. And then I copied their settings, and indeed, they were pretty okay. And then I saw a couple videos. I saw Dan Suzuki's video. I saw one from ERMS as well, which had some settings for the FFB. The default FFB is atrocious. Like, it's really bad. But once I got the settings from ERMS and from Dan, then yeah, it got a lot better. Good? No, it's still pretty bad, to be honest with you. It seems like the wheel is always loaded for some reason. You are on the straights or you're doing the corner, and there's this constant slate of load in the wheel. You're always kind of fighting the car. And then I can't really feel the understeer, and I'm kind of guessing. One thing that happened consistently during my time playing the game, I think I have about 20 hours played or something like that, 20 to 30. I'll recount the history as we move forward in the review. But there's some massive amount of understeer in the game, and I couldn't really dial it out with the FFB. So I would always look into the corner and think, all right, I'm going to turn in now. And then I turn in, and it's way too late. So they just overshoot the corner massively. Maybe it's the FOV. I'm not sure. I'll go back to the display in a little bit. But in any case, I had to adjust my driving massively. And this is very strange because pretty much when I jump into Project Car Shoe, or I jump into iRacing, or I jump into Assetto Corsa, I can hit the corners, right? I can hit the apex. That's one thing I can always do. Maybe I'm not carrying the most speed, or maybe it's not the best lap time ever. That's fine. But I'm not completely missing the corner. And in Forza, that happened all the time in the wheel, and that was very frustrating. What I ended up doing is just like turning in to hit the initial part of the corner. So I'm turning in not at the apex, but at the curb itself. And then somehow it seems like the car works it out and it gets okay-ish through it. Without much feedback, and sometimes you lose the car. I think Erms in his review mentioned that when you go over the curbs, the car gets unbalanced and you lose the rear, and it spins out really easily. And I have experienced that as well, for sure. What I ended up doing is I set the rules, the middle one, which has rewind, because at several points I would get hit by someone. I'll go back to the AI in a bit. Or something very strange would happen, like I would turn in and the car would lose the rear inexplicably. And I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to rewind, not going to restart the race. I mean, I really wanted to make it a more realistic experience, but I couldn't. So yeah, the FFB is not good. It's a bit shocking to me how bad it is, because pretty much every other game that I've played on PC with a wheel, once again, Project Cars, Automobilista, Assetto Corsa, and iRacing, those four, after some amount of tweaking, the FFB always got from at least good to very good. Never bad, never medium. It was always okay. I can feel something here. I have some frame of reference to control the car. And in Forza, yeah. In fact, I would say I played with the controller a bit. I would say I was more proficient with the controller, or at least as proficient with the controller as I was with the wheel, which is very disheartening when you have spent so much money in the setup. And I would rather play in the controller because I can do just as good lap times. I mean, anyway, display. So VR, no VR, triples, no triples. Yeah, it's not a simulation. You say in the comments, they're not targeting that market. That's fair. But I mean, really, like, come on now. Triples, for example, some amount of sim racers are going to play your game, right? I would imagine it's not that massive amount of development time to have triple support. You have however many cars you have in the game and all these other systems. I would consider triples to be somewhat of a basic feature at this point in time. I don't have triples, I only have VR. And once again, I would expect VR to be basic in the sense that it's a Microsoft game, right? And Microsoft is the maker of Windows. I use the Reverb G2, which uses the Windows Mixed Reality and OpenXR and iRacing. And so it's kind of a showcase of the operating system in a way, right? So if the VR in Forza was really good, it would be like, wow, we really want to have Windows, we really want to have VR because, see, this game looks fantastic. And the visuals in the game, especially during nights and during rain conditions, overcast conditions, they really look fantastic. Daytime is a bit hit or miss, but the others are really good. And seeing that in VR would be like, I would imagine it to be really immersive, right? To just see the rain falling the windshield and everything. But alas, no VR. And so what I had to do here is kind of a makeshift thing. I pulled the rig to this monitor that you're seeing right in front of me. And I got the second, I have like a couple of spare monitors on top there. I put it here on the desk and I ran on a single monitor. Pretty close to the wheel because you need a better FOV, but I mean, okay, so no VR, no triples, fine. Well, once again, fine. Let's move to single player. So single player, coming from the perspective of this review, which is Forza a good choice for you that have iRacing or other sim in your PC? I would imagine that single player is the best reason for you to get this game, right? So it's impossible to not mention the car XP thing. You probably know this by now, but the credits or the money you get in the game is only used to buy cars. Once you buy a car, it starts at level 1, and then you do races and practice and everything, and you gain points which gain you XP, and then your car can level up, I think, to level 50. And as you level up your car, you can get upgrades and everything. And in a vacuum, that seems really good. In fact, the first series I did, which was the hatchback thing, I got the Golf R. I always liked Golf. And plus, I think one of the best cars there, so that was nice. And as I leveled up the car and it got better, I was like, wow, this is fun. I'm liking this. I'm really liking this. And once I leveled up the car enough, I got the tires, I got the transmission parts, I put down the racing transmission, which was really good. And then the suspension, I did some research online to see what the appropriate parameters for the suspension, tire pressures, all that. I didn't want to spend a lot of time setting up the car, but the default set was a bit bad. And then after I did some tweaks, the car felt really good. And I was pretty happy. I think it was like a 4 or 5 race series, something like that. And then we move on to the next series. So there's, in the Builder's Cup, which is a single player, there's, I think, 5 series per level. There's 3 or 4 levels. There's about 20 series, I think, total. Thereabouts, right? And so I get to the second series, which is built for sport, right? And then you can buy sports car. And there's the Toyota Supra, and there's the Porsche Cayman, and other cars. I saved up a bit and I got the Porsche. And then you start back to from level 0. And then the Golf, which I had already upgraded, was feeling pretty good by this point. The Golf is gone. Now you have this Porsche that's level 0, and you have understeer for days. You just brake the car, you turn in, the car really doesn't turn in. And then once you hit the accelerator, it's like you're turning, you accelerate, the car goes straight, like completely straight. It's over. If you start accelerating, your capability of turning is revoked. And yeah, and so I started leveling up the Porsche. I did a race in Silverstone, I think other track, Grand Oak, no, probably Maple Valley. Well, good. So I'm not gonna comment about everything in the game. Tracks are okay. Perhaps could there be more tracks, but they look good as well. But anyway, so I'm leveling the Porsche and getting back the lost performance that I had in the Golf. And then, what do you know? Another series starts and I have to buy another car. At that point, I'm like, man, I'm gonna buy another car. I'm gonna start from level 0. The car is gonna be absolute garbage. I'm gonna have to trundle 2 to 3 races to get the basic parts. And then finally the car is gonna be okay to drive. And then what's gonna happen? I'm gonna go to another series. I'm gonna get another terrible car. And at this point, I just stopped. I was driving on my rig at this point. I laid back on the chair and I thought, what am I doing, man? Like, I'm not actually having fun here. Let's do something else. And so I didn't really want to, but I moved on to multiplayer at this point. But before we go to multiplayer, there's a couple more things I want to talk about the single player. So yeah, the car XP thing is very repetitive, I think. The first and the second time I upgraded the car, it was nice. But the third time I was like done with it, and I saw, yeah, we're gonna have to do this like 15 more times. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna. Maybe if I was younger, maybe if I was my school days. I did a bunch of stupid stuff when I played Gran Turismo. I did some 6-hour race, like pausing the game and restarting the next day. I did some school the wall riding like everyone did. I did some 100% on GT2, which everybody did. And yeah, like, would I do that today? Probably not, man. Probably not. It takes a long time. And I got more stuff to do these days with like work and kids and everything. And so that's how life goes, right? And so I'm not going to say that the car upgrade system is bad necessarily, just that it's not for me. It's not for me. It's not for perhaps you or most people that are watching this video that are 30, 40 years old and have other commitments in life. It's a huge time sink. And most of it is not exactly fun. You're trundling with a bad car, and once you get to an acceptable level, just change cars. Okay, finally, AI. AI is very important in single player, right? Yeah, it is. Is the AI good? Yeah, no, not really. So you can select the starting point you have on the grid. I don't like that, to be honest. I think I'm more strict since I come from an iRacing background. So I'd like to have qualifying, and you get the time in qualifying, that's your start position. Oh, but the PC is 2 seconds faster than you. So be it, man. You're starting 20th. I'm sorry. Either you get better or you reduce the difficulty or you do something else. Or you posted the best qualifying time of your life and you're 5 seconds ahead of P2. Perhaps up the difficulty then, right? Because it seems like you're running on a lower scale. So the fact that you can select the position of the grid is a bit strange to me, because like if I start 20th, it's going to compound, right? Because what happens, I'm sure you've heard this as well, is that there's some mess in the beginning of the race, and it really is like the AI is kind of oblivious to what's happening in the beginning there. Everybody's side by side. Some people go off the track. You're running inside and the car just turns into you, or you're running outside and they just Hamilton your way on cops or something, and then you just get sent into the ball. This was one of the reasons also that I started playing with Rewind, because I think 3 times in a row I started the race. I started as carefully as I would in iRacing. I was using cockpit cam, right? So I'm really thinking, all right, this guy is by my side. This is AI. I could just go over the guys, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm trying to play realistically. And so I am looking to the side, right, I'm gonna give this guy space, and then bam, just get yeeted to Narnia, and then it's over. And then, you know what, I'm just gonna play with Rewind. So Rewind until, okay, this is an acceptable start. It's not like I gained 10 positions, not what I want, just not to get completely shadow run by the PC, by the AI. Okay, once that's done, then there's the second phase of the race. The first positions, P1, P2, P3, they just disappear into the distance pretty much, which is par for the course, right? If you were in iRacing, it's pretty much what would happen anyways. So I guess that's fair in a sense. The problem there is, I think, more the duration of the race. I really can't complain much. If it was something realistic, like a half-hour race, a 45-minute race or something, maybe with lap over lap you would have a differential in pace where you could get to them and then overtake the CPU in that scenario. But races are like 6 laps, 8 laps, and so there's not enough time for you to reach them after the... I'm assuming that you start in like 10th, right? 10th, 12th, or 14th, something like that. And then it's hard to win the race, which is fine. You don't have to win every race. That's okay. And now the thing that really put a damper on my excitement with the single player and the AI was the fact that once you get past an opponent, it's very hard for them to get past, to like overtake you. So you do some sort of movement, you like throw it on the inside, outbrake them, great. And then even if your pace is worse than the car behind, they don't try to overtake you. Like I was using the rearview mirror at this point and just like driving slowish, taking off the foot of the gas, and it's not like they're trying to actively overtake me. Or if I take a bad line, I mean, if you go off track, then sure, they will pass you. But if you don't make any egregious mistake, you're not getting overtaken. So what would happen is I would start like 12th or something. I'd gain a lot of positions in the initial lap because it's a mess. I'd be like P6, P5, P4, P3 sometimes. And then nobody would pass me ever. I never got overtaken in a single race. It's not like because I'm God's gift to motorsport or anything. I made mistakes, but I don't know. They just don't try to overtake you. So what are we doing here, right? Because the guys up front, I perhaps can reach, but they need more laps to match their lap times and then take off the difference. And the guys that I passed already are not going to overtake me. Well, let's just end the race then, right? Let's do 2 laps. That's fine. Let's stop wasting time here. So yeah, the AI kind of put a damper on that. Okay, let's move to multiplayer then. I was really upset with the fact that you get a level 0 car and then you're just trudging along and the car feels terrible. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try the multiplayer. Already got the game. I got it on Game Pass. It was like $6 or something for the month, which is okay. Like $6 for this experiment is not a problem. Let's experience the full game. And so I went to the placement races. You use, I think, a Civic R, right? Maxed out. And once I got into the track, I was shocked. Wow, the car is really good. I mean, you turn the car and it actually turns. You accelerate the car and there's literally no wheel spin and you actually accelerate properly. And I'm like, hang on a second. And maybe if you actually maximize the car to level 50, the car feels good. And after I experimented with other cars in multiplayer, I really got that feel that once the cars are maxed, they don't feel that terrible. They feel good sometimes. And like the fact that you start with cars, level 0 cars in the Builders Cup gives a terrible impression of the game because you start thinking every car sucks, all cars understeer, everything I tried doesn't work. And then once you go to multiplayer and get an actually good car, you're like, well, this is fine. And yeah. So I think that the game kind of self-sabotages in a way there because instead of showing you the best that they have in terms of cars, they show you the worst that they have and you have to deal with that in single player. All right, so 3 placement races. I did one in Grand Oak, one in Laguna Seca Short, and what's the final one? I think it's Hakone, right? Yeah, I think it was Hakone. I thought the placements were very weird, to be honest with you. I got rammed on all 3 races. And in one, I think it was in Hakone, I was starting from the outside on T1, which is going to the right. And then I was playing, at this point I was playing without any assist, so ABS off, TCS off, everything, manual shifting, of course, and cockpit cam. I saw the guy on the inside, I'm like, all right, I'm going to give him space. And so I'm going through the corner as far out as possible so as not to hit anyone. And then I guess someone overcooked the entry or something like that. I'm not going to say it's intentional or anything, but the guy hit me, and then I got sent into the wall and dropped to penultimate position, something like that. And then I got a penalty for, I think, 2.85 seconds for an avoidable collision. And at that point, I'm like, maybe this penalty system is not as good as I thought initially. Because iRacing's penalty system is faultless, right? So if you go off track, you get an 1x. If you hit the wall, it's a 2x. If you hit someone, it's 4x for both of you. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. And people complain about that all the time because they're like, it's not my fault. The guy hit me. And people always argue that it's really hard to program a system that can determine fault, which I believe to be the case. And people counter-argument with that. They don't want to do the work. There's AI for that these days and everything. And so, well, now we have a game that is actually trying to attribute fault and trying to give penalties according to the actions. And I can say firsthand that in the current implementation is not really good. Because there were more than a few occasions where I got punished for something that I didn't actually do. I was kind of the victim of it. And other times where I actually got the good end of it. Sometimes I cut the track and got a time advantage, and then off track, no penalty. I'm like, all right, let's keep going. But that would be a 1x or a slowdown in iRacing otherwise. Back to the placements. There was a placement in Laguna Seca where there were 3 people in the race. It was me and 2 other guys. With my racing experience, I just hung back because I knew that something was going to happen. And sure enough, second corner, the second guy just sends the first one into stratosphere with a very ill-intentioned punt, for which he got, I think, a 2-second penalty. And the guy fell back, I think, 15 seconds until he recovered his car or anything. So the amount of punishment really wasn't that appropriate as well. And then, obviously, we continued on with the race. But I don't understand how they can do placements in terms of SR and IR, rating and safety rating, with so few people in the race, right? I guess the placement shouldn't happen with 3 people in the race. I don't know. Anyway, so I did the placements, and I saw there was a Formula Mazda Cup, which was spec, and I thought, wow, this is really nice, because not only I do like open wheelers more than tin tops, but also it's spec, so I won't be at a disadvantage for not having bought the car and maxed it out or anything. Until I found out that actually if you own the car, apparently, I'm not completely certain of this, right? I didn't experiment, but I read about it, so perhaps you can confirm this by yourself. But if you own the car and you have maxed it out, then you can customize the setup of the car in the spec race. So it would be open setup for you. It's not that your car is inherently better, but that you can customize parameters like suspension and aero and whatnot, which would give you an advantage for sure, right? Especially because the default setup very hardly would be the best one. Okay, so let's see. Once I started that, the ramming continued. I did a couple races, I think 4 or 5 races, I don't remember. In every single one I got rammed by someone. I wouldn't say it's necessarily malicious. One of them was, it was in Homestead, Miami. I was doing a left-hander, and then I left plenty of space to the guy, and he just veered to the right to get me off track, and then he continued taking the corner, so that was very deliberate. But all in all, I think that people were well-mannered. It wasn't as bad as I expect for Forza's reputation. There was a deliberate collision that I saw, not that I suffered much, and the standard of driving was pretty low, especially when compared to iRacing, right? But I can imagine for sure that, as people are saying in other YouTube videos, that if you have a high rating and a high SR, the racing is respectful. I can certainly buy that. It may very well be the possibility. In fact, I had one very good race in Silverstone where me and another guy, we just kept, I think, 1 second off of each other, 2 seconds max, over a 14-lap race. And in one point, I was overtaking him, and then unfortunately, I was trying to pass him from the inside. My tires were degraded, and I understeered into him, took him off the track. I just stopped and waited for him to come back and gave him back the position. We resumed racing, especially because the third place was 30 seconds back, and so I could really afford the time. The skill gap is all over the place, right? I guess it's par for the course for a popular game. It's commonplace for like P1, P2, P3 to be at a pace level, and then the other guys are completely off, and you have gaps of 10 seconds, 20 seconds in a few laps race, which is not very competitive, right? But anyway, what can you do? On that Silverstone race, something quite unfortunate happened, I think, is because we started practice and it was very, very foggy, very hard to see anything. And I was trying my best to like brake early. I didn't have the racing line. As I mentioned, I didn't have any assists up to this point. This was my last race in the game. And so up until this point, I was playing with 0 assists, no ABS, no TC, no racing line, no nothing. Cockpit cam as well. And it was very foggy, so I'm like braking early, trying to see where the track is, and sometimes missing. And after a couple laps, I got my bearings and started lapping faster. But it was still hard to see the track. And I posted some lap times, and I was kind of 8 seconds off the pace or something insane like that. I'm sitting back and thinking, man, there's no way I'm 8 seconds slower than everyone. Like, this is insane. And I thought back to myself, hang on. I know. I turned on the racing line. And now I could see everything because I don't actually have to see the track. I just have to look at the line, right? The line tells me when to accelerate and when to coast and when to brake. The line's not perfect. You can like override the suggestions a little bit. But if the viewing conditions are bad, just use the line. And then I stopped once again. I thought, you know what? Up until this point, every single start, I was getting passed by a bunch of people. So I would start P1 or start P3 or P2 or whatever. And then I step on the throttle, we take off, and then I drop back to P5, P6 or something. And I'm like, wow, how am I so bad at starts? At this point in Silverstone, when I turned on the racing line, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to turn on everything. And so I turned on ABS, I turned on TC, I turned on, well, not like the actual game braking for you or game turning for you, but the car assist, like stability control, right, the other one. I turned all of that on. Okay. And immediately after I turned all of that on, I did one lap and I was P1 on the qualifying. And then I thought to myself, well, what am I doing here, man? Like, I think that the game should have a consistent settings for everyone. So if a car has ABS, like a GT3 car, everybody has access to ABS. Nobody has access to the racing line, or everybody has access to the racing line, or nobody has access to TC if the car doesn't have TC. This is Formula Mazda, right? So there's no, as far as I understand, there's no ABS, there's no TC, there's no stability control. That should all be off limits. You can't use that at all because the car doesn't have that. But no, apparently you can turn that on and it's fine. And so, what do you know? Once the race starts, my start is absolutely perfect because I have traction control now. And yeah, the game became a lot easier, obviously, because you didn't have to do any throttle control. You just like step on the gas 100% and then throttle control do its thing. Once I get to a corner, I just stomp on the brakes. ABS does its thing. Became pretty automatic. Way less fun, for sure. And yeah, like the magic of the game, of the multiplayer was kind of over by then. The only thing I kept was cockpit cam. Though, admittedly, I think that chase cam is way better because you have the vision, right? To see if someone is by your side and avoid collisions and all that. And at this point, which is the end of this review, indeed, I thought, well, since I have iRacing, why don't you just go play iRacing, right? And yeah, so answering the question that is the title of this video, if you have iRacing, should you play Forza? There's very limited FFB, not very good. There's no support for triples or VR. Single player has uninspired AI and a very repetitive experience where you just keep buying bad cars over and over, upgrading them, and once they get acceptable, you just move on to the next series. And as for multiplayer, I can buy the fact that in upper levels, people race respectfully and it's a bit better, but doesn't change the fact that everybody can and probably will be using some sort of assist, be it ABS, be it TC, be it racing line, be it chase cam. And so, I mean, if you have iRacing, if you have ACC, I guess I would just keep playing that, man, which is what I'm going to do. So yeah, that's my take. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Unfortunately, it's not what I wanted from the game. I really wanted something to be kind of like Gran Turismo 4, you know, a very nice single-player experience that would recreate a career, maybe have the license test or something of the sort. And yeah, that's not it. Well, anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.